When I was a kid, Mama was a regional director for a fast-growing retail chain expanding throughout the Northeast. The summer of 2003 she was managing launch of a new store in a small Vermont town. Since the project would last until August, she decided to bring my father and me along. The company arranged for us to stay in a colonial-style house on the outskirts of Montgomeryville, a tiny town of about 2,000 people tucked to the Green Mountains. Our temporary home sat at the end of a desolate road in a partially developed neighborhood called Cedar Falls. With a dense forest close, with towering hammocks and sugar apples forming an almost impenetrable wall of darkness beyond our backyard. Many of the houses and citadels remain occupied, their empty windows staring out at the untamed wilderness. A development company only recently begun carving the community out of the thick woods. And there was something eerie about the way the neatly arranged houses abruptly ended at the tree line, as if the forest refused to yield any further. Luckily, I met Alex, and River 30 an old who lived a few houses down. We quickly became friends, bonding over our shared passion for mountain biking and mutual frustration with small-town life. The local kids had created an intricate web of truths through the woods, and Alex eagerly introduced me to the best routes. Montgomeryville itself dated back to the 1780s, but it offered little in terms of excitement. One particularly slow Sunday afternoon, Alex and I ended up wandering through the town's small historical society museum. Just as we were about to leave, I overheard an elderly visitor asking the curator about something called the vanished settlement. The curator brushed it off as nothing more than local legend, and the phrase ignited my curiosity like a spark on dry tinder. When I later asked Alex about the vanished settlement, they were unusually evasive, quickly steering the conversation a different direction with a nod nervousness. It took me 5 long weeks of summer before I finally got my answers. One sweltering afternoon, as Alex and I were building a makeshift bike ramp over a narrow creek, we noticed a group of teenagers slipping into the woods. They carried flashlights and contraband beer. A nervous laughter echoed through the trees as they tried to spook each other. "Wonder where they're headed," I murmured, watching Alex's face closely. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, his expression to something more serious. Slowly, he stood up. "Oh, I think I know exactly going," pulse quickened. "Tell me." Alex hesitated, his voice heavy with reluctance. "I think they're looking for that lost town." "The what?" Con, I scoffed. "You've been holding out on me this whole time, haven't you? I need to know." I playfully grabbed his shoulders and mocked desperation, but there was real urgency behind my words. Alex sighed, picked up his bike, and started walking down the trail. I quickly followed, wheel in mind beside him. "The lost town isn't just some campfire story," he finally said. "Legend has it that Montgomeryville had a sister town hidden somewhere deep in these woods. Then, one day, about 150 years ago, it just disappeared. The people, the buildings, everything. No one knows if they fled, died, or something worse. Even the town's name was lost to time. Now, every generation of local kids to find it, it's kind of the rite of passage. Alex, we should." "No." He spun around sharply, his eyes wide with warning. "A kid went searching for it back in the 70s. Never they found his body 10 years later, miles from anywhere. He got lost out there." Alex shook his head. "It's easier than you think. Everything in the forest looks the same." But my mind was already racing with possibilities. A kid was probably hiding something. It was the cities. We're different. We're smarter. Besides, I've got my dad's GPS. He would even know is missing for a day. Alex studied me for a moment, momentarily distracted. The weight of grown-up in Montgomeryville etched into his face. At times, Alex seemed almost charmingly unaware of modern technology. "Satellite navigation," I explained. "Come and be a venture." He checked his watch, mumbling, "I should head back. Dad's taking me to a movie tonight." We rode in silence, the tension between us thick, until we reached the old train tracks. nearly swallowed by decades of creeping vegetation. As I studied the rusted rails, an idea struck me. Hey, I know you don't want to talk about it, but has anyone ever actually found anything out there? Alex hesitated before answering. Not really, my friend's older brother swears he once found human bones. But nobody believed him. Interesting. I let that sinking. Where do most people look? He pointed toward the dense forest where we'd seen the teenagers heading. Usually by the lake. Makes sense, right? If they read it was another town, they'd have built it near water. So that's where everyone goes searching. Exactly. I gestured at the rusted tracks beneath us. Which is why we should follow these instead. Think about it. Why would anyone lay down track deep into the woods unless there was something important at the other end? Alex frowned, considering my words. Slowly, nodded to actually make sense. Then no one ever follows the tracks that way. I raised an eyebrow. Not, that's correction missing, kid went. I should have felt uneasy. Maybe I did. But curiosity burned brighter than caution. 2 days later, I made my move, and was the weekend before we were set to leave Montgomeryville for good. My parents were hosting a barbecue for my mom's new coworkers and some neighbors. While the adults chatted outside, Alex stayed in the cool darkness of the house, playing video games on my PlayStation, pretending not to notice the Incan attraction that'd been summering all summer. With only 5 days left before I left town, there wasn't much left to lose. I'd love to say my intentions were pure, but they weren't. I figured if I could make Alex want to impress me, he might agree to explore the tracks. The lost town completely taken over my thoughts. Every morning that week, I had pored over dusty records in the local library, searching for answers. But all I found were legends. Legends don't just appear out of nowhere. I was convinced that somewhere in those woods, the truth was waiting to be uncovered. We needed to leave by 2:00 p.m. to have enough daylight. My bag was already packed. Water bottles, flashlight, camera, and a can of spray paint. If we wandered too far from the tracks, I figured we'd need a way to mark our path. I thought I was being smart. None of it mattered in the end. I was such a fool. Setting down my controller, I turned to Alex. We were to the woods one last time. I raised an eyebrow, flashing a playful smile. Alex sat up quickly, then caught himself trying to act casual. I mean, sure. Let's go. I grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the door, snatching my strategically placed backpack on the way out. Alex was too distracted to notice. He was walking even faster than I was, so he could barely glance back. It wasn't until he tripped over the train tracks that he finally saw the backpack. He turned to me, his expression sharp, like, "You can be serious, Katie." "Come on, Alex," I co-voiced, soft, persuasive. "Just for a little while. We'll be back before anyone even realizes we're on 2 hours max." He shook his head, jaw tight. Please. I met his gaze. "I'm leaving in 5 days. I just want one real adventure before I go." Alex stared down at the tracks, his face a battlefield of emotions. I held my breath. Finally, he exhaled long and heavy. "Fine, but we stick to the tracks the entire time, and we turn back exactly at 1 hour, no arguments." "Deal." On impulse, I hugged him, my heart racing with excitement. It would be the first and last time I ever embraced him. As we walked, we talked about everything and nothing. Summer memories, favorite movies, what high school might be like. Every so often, we paused to make sure we were still following the tracks, which were becoming increasingly tangled with overgrowth. The late afternoon sun filtered the canopy above, casting strange, shifting patterns on the forest floor. Alex checked his watch and frowned. "That's weird. It says 5 hours it." "No way. I just left, maybe 2 hours ago." "Your watch must be broken." I gave him a playful shove. At another, knees tightened in my stomach, and Alex raised an eyebrow. "Even if it is, we should probably turn back." He wasn't wrong. The shadows were stretching longer by the minute, and as I glanced around, I couldn't shake the feeling that it really could be 500. The forest felt different now. denser, older, almost as if it had been waiting for something, but wasn't ready to give up. As we walked, I noticed something off to our right, a large shape in the distance, maybe a quarter-mile away, against the surrounding trees, its clean, geometric lines feeling strangely out of place in the wild. "Alex, look at that." I pointed. He turned, shoulders instantly tensed. "I was hoping you wouldn't notice it. We have to check it out." "It's too far from the tracks," he said firmly. "We'd never find our way back." "Yeah, we would." I reached into my backpack and pulled out the spray paint, holding it up triumphantly. Thoughts with this hesitated, then took the can and gave it a quick shake before spraying a red X onto a nearby tree. "Okay, fine. But I do them argue." As we ventured into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around us, pressing tighter, like they were shifting ever so slightly when we were looking. Alex marked each tree with a bright red X, but the paint looked jarring against the ancient bark. Too new, too artificial, like we were defacing something that had been untouched for centuries. After about 10 minutes of walking, we stepped into a small clearing, and rising before us like something out of a dream, or a nightmare. An old stone church, its grey walls darkened by age and creeping moss. Part of the roof had collapsed, leaving jagged edges exposed to the sky. But what unsettled me most wasn't its decay. It was how wrong it looked. The architecture didn't make sense. The angles were slightly off, as if whoever built it had only a vague understanding of how structures were supposed to stand. Ali shicked, and Alex whispered, barely audible, "Actually found something." With trembling hands, I pulled out my camera and snapped a picture of the church's eerie facade. Above the wooden door, a weather prick sat in bed in the stone, its text long eroded by time and the elements. At the door itself, something far stranger. Symbols carved deep into the wood, twisting in ways that made my eyes ash if I stared too long. "Mixed tragedy and sigh," I said, though my voice sounded distant, like it didn't quite belong to me. Alex hesitated. "Katie, maybe we shouldn't. Something feels rife. Everything about this place felt wrong." The air was unnervingly still, heavy, suffocating. Even the birds had gone silent, but I had come too far to stoplu. Just a quinity phoenix, 5 minutes tops. "Come on, Alex," he wavered, then sighed in defeat. The front door refused to budge, and matter how hard we pushed. But as we circled the building, we found a smaller door at the back. When Alex pressed against it, the hinges groaned, releasing the agonized creak that through the empty church like a scream. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. The scent of rot clung to every surface. Crumbling pews lined a narrow aisle to what I first assumed was a pulpit. But as my eyes adjusted to the dimness, my stomach turned. It wasn't a pulpit. It was a crucifix, but unlike any I had ever seen. The paint had faded almost entirely, except in 2 places, the face and the wounds. The eyes, eerily untouched by time, stared directly at me, their intensity almost unbearable. And the wound looked fresh, like they were still bleeding. I stood frozen, unable to tear my eyes away from the crucifix. Then, a sound through the church, stone grinding against stone. It came from everywhere at once, reverberating off the crumbling walls, racing in their bones until my teeth hurt. "Do you hear that?" Alex whispered. Before I could answer, we heard it again, closer this time, and unmistakably coming from beneath us. The floor trembled with each grinding echo. Dust rained down from the rotting beams above. "There's something underneath the floor," Alex said, unsteady. He took a hesitant step forward, and a floorboard groaned under his weight. He froze, and deliberately pressed down again. The hollow sound that followed sent a chill through me. "Alex, don't." But he was already on his knees, brushing away decades of dirt debris. I aimed flashlight at the spot he was clearing, revealing what looked like the outline of a trapdoor. Its edges were carved with the same symbols we had seen on the church entrance. "I think we need to leave," I said. The grinding nose had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse, thick, suffocating. Even the dust in the air seemed to hang motionless, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Alex traces fingers along the edge of the trapdoor. If something is down here, don't you want to know what happened? To this place, to those people. God help me, I did. But every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. The crucifix eyes seemed to follow us, and they were bleeding now. Thin trays had begun to seep down the figure's hands, fresh and glistening in the dim light. 2 minutes, Alex said, gripping the iron ring embedded in the wood. Look for 2 minutes, then we leave. I should have said no. I should have turned and run. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed, as Alex left the heavy door open. A staircase led down into absolute darkness. A wave of hot, stale air rushed up below, carrying with it. A wave of stale air rushed up from the darkness below, carrying with it the scent of ancient stone. And something else. Something that made my skin crawl. I aimed my flashlight downward, but the beam was swallowed by the void, unable to find the bottom. As we stood there, frozen on the edge of that impossible darkness, I heard a sound that still haunts my dreams. The grinding grew louder, rising from the depths like something waking up. And with it, this thick and ancient decay, suffocating and wrong. Alex's grip on my hand tightened. I think we should run, he whispered. We didn't hesitate, and bowed up the stairs, my flashlight whipping wildly across the walls as the noise behind us became deafening. Each impact rattled the church's foundations. Shaking new decades of duxton halfway up, I stumbled. Alex grabbed me, yanking me to my feet with more strength than I thought he had. Don't look back, he screamed. But I did, and what I saw in them had changed me forever. It was no longer stone. It was alive. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, shifting and undulating as it surged forward. And its face, twisted and natural, something so wrong my brain refused to fully comprehend it. We lunged through the trapdoor, and Alex slammed it shut behind us. Or tried to. Something caught it from below, the inch which stood as massive claws punched through, carving deep gouges into the timber. The door, I shrieked, pointing at the church entrance. We have to get out. We sprinted for it, but the door wouldn't budge. The strange symbols carved to its surface seemed to shift in the dying light, as though the wood itself was fighting to keep us inside. Behind us, a trapdoor exploded upward in a spray of splinters. The windows. Alex grabbed a broken piece of pew and hurled it at the nearest window, and glass shattered, but the opening was too high to reach. I'll boost you up, he said, already locking his fingers together to make a step. Katie, and not leaving you. You have to. Someone needs to make it out. To tell the rest. His words robbed by a sound so inhuman it rattled the very foundation of the church. We both turned. It was rising from the hole in the floor. Towering, its horns greasy in its face, Alex shoved me toward the window. Oh, I stepped into his hands, and he launched me upward. The jagged glass tore into my palms as I scrambled. I turned back to help him. But Alex wasn't there anymore. The creature had caught him. I stood frozen, horror gripping of inch of me. The creature tried to lift the ground with one massive claw. He didn't scream. He just looked at me, his filled with absolute terror, and mouthed one word: run. So I did. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I ran until the sun set and rose again. I couldn't even remember why I was running anymore. When they found me 2 days later, I was stumbling on the train tracks. Delirious, barely able to speak. I told them Alex was still in the church. But when the search teams went looking, they found Osage. No clearing, not in the spray painted X we had marked along the trees. The camera was gone too. Every picture we had taken that summer vanished. Even ones from the day before. Gone were the photos of us riding bikes. Gone were the ones of us swimming in the lake, curiosity and laughing the sun. It was as if Alex had never existed. My parents didn't remember him. Nobody did. The house where he had lived stood empty. And when I asked the neighbors that the fun had been there that summer, they just gave me blank stares. They told me the house had always been vacant. Sometimes, I wonder if I loofed of my palms. Thin white scars trace the pattern of shattered glass, a permanent reminder of that night. I know it was real. Alex was real, deep in those woods. The thing is still waiting. Because of us, I never returned to Montgomery Ville after that summer. My mother finished her work remotely, and we sold the house without ever setting foot there again. But last week, 22 years later, I received a letter. No return name, scrawled in shaky handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single photograph, worn, yellowed with age. The image showed two 13-year-olds standing in front of a half-finished housing development, their mountain bikes leaning against a tree behind them. One of them was me. The photo was impossible. Every picture from that summer had vanished without a trace. And yet there it was, solid, tangible, real, trembling in my hands. I flipped it over. On the din that steady hand were 3 words still finding me. I burned the photograph that night, but it didn't matter. The dreams have started again, and now when I look in the mirror, I catch glimpses of symbols, those same twisted markings from the church door, flickering across the glass. They vanish when I blink, but I know it's not over, not yet. Somewhere in Vermont, there is a town called Montgomery Ville. The train tracks still lead into the woods, still waiting for someone else to follow them, still promising answers to questions that should never be asked. And if you ever find yourself there, if you ever hear whispers of the lost town, or notice strange symbols carved into ancient wood, or meet someone who's just a little too eager to show you the old paths through the forest, run.